Hi, I'm Stephen Yan.
And I'm Elena Zhou. In this presentation, we will explore how Chinese culture impacts and is impacted by its language. To answer this question, let's first look at some important historical events for the Chinese language. From the very beginning, the language was intertwined with ancient Chinese culture. During the Shang dynasty, the first complex written texts appeared as pictographic carvings on turtle shells used in religious fortune-telling. This set of more than 4,500 characters is called Jiaguwen, which directly translates to text on shell. This form of text continued to develop until the end of the Zhou dynasty, where, due to a lack of central government and the resulting division between regional societies, written text became decentralized. Interestingly, while written text was split between regions, the first standard spoken Chinese appeared. Yayan, as it was called, was used as a diplomatic language across states. It was used mainly by the higher classes and educated men, such as the famous philosopher Confucius. The written script system was eventually unified by Xuanhan, the victor of the warring states. He made numerous reforms, including one that enforces 小篆, or small seal script, as the official script. This is important because modern Chinese writing is a direct descendant of the archaic system. Over the next 2,000 years, the Chinese language continues to evolve. In the early 1900s, revolutionaries in China began movements to modernize written Chinese. They mainly sought to simplify the style of classical literature, which is too poetic and imprecise for everyday use. Therefore, these movements only dealt with syntactic, grammatical, and vocabulary changes instead of altering the script system itself. The script system in mainland China was later officially changed to modern simplified Chinese in 1964. In the 1900s, Chinese society leaned heavily towards anti-traditional and modernizing movements, and it is reflected in the ways Chinese language is impacted. Knowing the general history of the Chinese language, we can start to think about how it is connected to Chinese culture. A unique feature for Chinese is 成语, or idioms. Unlike most other languages, Chinese idioms generally do not derive naturally from informal colloquial conversations. Instead, these are usually 4-character-long, non-divisible expressions that are coined in masterpieces of classical literature. These expressions usually depict mythological tale, historical event, or allegorical story, while signifying an underlying moral or philosophical message. Here is an example of one of such that is based on an allegory. This expression, 自相矛盾, tells the tale of a merchant who sells what he claims to be an indestructible shield and an unstoppable spear. However, a spectator questioned him by asking what would happen if he used his spear to stab the shield. This expression was created over 2,000 years ago by Han Fei, a famous philosopher during the Warring State period. Despite its age, the idiom is still widely used nowadays, usually to describe a situation that is self-conflicting. This is merely one of thousands of idioms recorded in the Chinese dictionaries. Since Chinese society today values education on historical literature and traditional culture, almost all Chinese people understand some of the idioms. Thus, we use these expressions ubiquitously, from formal speeches to everyday conversations. The fact that these niche expressions are still widely used indicates the extent at which Chinese culture impacts the language.
Next, let's take a look at sociolinguistics topics concerning ethnicity and dialects. Although throughout Chinese history, each dynasty had its own version of official speech, there has always existed regional dialects, which vary in terms of similarities to each other. This remains the case for modern Chinese society. The main differences between dialects are mostly phonological instead of syntactic. For example, in Wu Chinese, which is the group of dialects used mainly in Shanghai and Zhejiang province, there is a tendency to retain the voiced plosives and fricatives seen in Middle Chinese. Often, these differences also include vocabulary, where different dialects contain unique informal slangs. For example, in my parents' native dialect, Xi'an dialect, there is a well-known expression, 克里马擦, which means to hurry up. However, when taken out of context, this would not make sense to other Chinese speakers. Many factors might impact how dialects developed in China. Due to the sheer size of the country, it is not unreasonable that so many different dialects exist. A geographical trend for Chinese dialects is that northern dialects are more similar and non-distinctive, while southern dialects vary dramatically from each other, even if two communities are relatively close. The reason for this is that northern China consists more of vast plains with little barrier to migration, and southern China is filled with lush jungles and mountain ranges, which serves to isolate communities and accelerate language change. Occasionally, dialects are impacted by assimilating with other ethnicities. These events cause more sudden and drastic changes than geographical isolation alone. Sometimes this results in a situation of diglossia, where although Standard Chinese is the official language in the region, people still use the preferred native language in everyday situations. For example, in Xinjiang province, the Uyghur population speak their own language. In Tibetan regions, locals speak Lhasa Tibetan, and in Inner Mongolia, many speak Mongolian. These are the most obvious examples of ethnicity-based code switching in China, where people use different languages depending on the situation. Overall, we see that Chinese culture and society impacts the Chinese language because its history dictates how Chinese scripts and speech developed. Its literature inspires and is inspired by unique social-linguistic features such as idioms, and its geographical expansion shaped how dialects formed. To conclude, I'll raise a further question of reflection. I would like to ask, what is the future of Chinese? Specifically, how will the information age and the resulting fast-changing popular culture in China impact how people speak? Things to think about might include code mixing with foreign languages or the rise and falls of different internet slangs. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening.